So Transformers is interesting. When I first saw it, I thought all the actual, like, Transformers were really cool. But then there's some scenes where you kind of just sit there thinking, why? Like, yeah, this is cool. This, not so much. This is good. No, this is bad. Maybe, not really. Kind of cool. Maximum, yes. But all that aside, the music in Transformers was also interesting. I mean, it's a weird situation. For example, when you think of the music to Transformers, you probably think of Arrival to Earth. Which makes sense, it's a significant moment in the film with what is arguably the main theme. But when I revisited this film, believe it or not, I found a bunch of leitmotifs. Some of them made sense, and some of them didn't. Like there's this leitmotif that represents the Autobots.
For a time we lived in harmony, but like all great power, you risked your life to protect the cube.
No sacrifice.
All right, I need you to take this cube, get it into military hands while we hold them off. There are a lot of people are gonna die.
The president has dispatched battle groups in the Arabian Gulf and Yellow Sea.
And then there's a leitmotif for Sam.
All right, Mojo, I got the car. Now I need the girl. Dude, are you sure we're invited to this party? Of course, Miles.
And there's a leitmotif for the Decepticons.
Man 217!
Yeah?
Where is the eBay item 21153?
Dear God, what is this?
And then there's this leitmotif that, like, I don't know, I guess it's just supposed to sound sad.
Somebody else! You can't just leave him to die and become some human experiment. Shield.
No matter what happens, I'm really glad I got in that car with you.
I'm not sure, it's sort of hard to tie down, but what gets more confusing is that on the soundtrack, this track is actually labeled Optimus. Then there's this other theme that represents Bumblebee.
Trust me. Sam, get in.
But it also represents the Allspark.
Carbon dating puts the cube here around 10,000 BC.
But what gets even more confusing is that there's also this other theme that you can argue represents Bumblebee as well.
Yes.
But on top of all that confusion, you can actually see these leitmotifs eventually contribute to the narrative of the film overall. Like at the end of the film when Sam is running from Megatron with the cube, you hear the theme that can be described as representing the Allspark alongside the theme for the Decepticons. And this is kind of the detriment to not having accurate leitmotifs. When your leitmotifs are any kind of inconsistent, it makes it difficult to assign all the narrative influence that they're supposed to have. So for a first-time viewer, the association between the story and the music might not make complete sense, and the music won't really add to the story. There's a chance that a lot of listeners missed out on this moment during the first-time viewing. But what's more is that not all of these musical themes are treated equally. Some have melodies, and some either don't really have any melodic content at all, or just aren't as developed as other leitmotifs. Like if you look at Sam's leitmotif or the leitmotif for the Decepticons, there's no real melody. It's more like an accompaniment, or if you did want to call it a melody, then it's a very basic melody. But if you look at something like the Autobots theme, then there's a clear melody with phrases and complete ideas. Now, we could sit here for the next half hour and talk about what does and does not count as a melody, and go over periods and antecedent and consequent phrases and cadential formula, but that can all get kind of dense, and I'm not up for defining what qualifies as developing a motif, especially because the track I want to talk about uses a lot of sequencing. In short, I don't want to get into a philosophical debate about what does and does not count as a melody. So instead, let's just say that there's some thematic thematic material in the score for Transformers that's more developed than others. So, if you look at Arrival to Earth, it actually has like phrases to it. It has melodic content. In fact, Arrival to Earth is kind of fascinating in that it actually has got some similarities, believe it or not, to Let It Go. It waits to break out a 4-chord structure until the big memorable part of the track. In the case of Let It Go, it's literally the 4-chord pattern.
Let it go, let it go. I am one with the wind and sky.
In the case of Arrival to Earth, it's a slightly modified version of those 4 chords. But what gets even more intriguing is that this section of the melody uses a lot of chord tones, meaning that the melody is made up of notes that appear in the chord progression. All in all, this gives us a super simple section of music with a super simple melody, which is exactly what you're going to want if you want your film to be as popular and accessible as possible and reach a wide audience. And aside from arguably being the most developed piece of music in the whole film, it also plays during a montage with very little dialogue, forcing the audience to focus more on the music. But where Transformers gets really interesting is when you look at Transformers as a series. For example, I just talked about Arrival to Earth being one of the more developed musical ideas in Transformers, having a simple structure and being played during a montage with almost no dialogue. You can directly compare that with a scene in the second film where all the Decepticons are assembling, but with a less pronounced piece of music. I would argue that this piece of music doesn't have as much of a developed melody as Arrival to Earth, which in turn makes it less noticeable. And when you get to the second film, you can actually see that a lot of the leitmotifs stay consistent. We still have Arrival to Earth functioning as the de facto main theme for the series. We still hear that Autobots theme.
I'll take you all on! Don't!
We get one of the Bumblebee themes. And we even hear Sam's leitmotif reappearing as well.
Oh, Ma.
Oh, my little...
I'm glad she ain't my mama.
Oh, and he recently had his cherry pop.
But look at that track titled Optimus. In the first film, it was used as kind of a generic sad theme. And in the second film, it's not really that different.
Suffocating in here. You deserve better than this.
It's lost.
You gotta get in the car and you get to safety. No, this is...
But check out this track from the second film called Prime. The track Prime is a variation of the track Optimus. Had they used this Optimus track as an actual theme for Optimus, then the theme for the Primes would have actually been musically related to Optimus. You might even say that the theme transformed. Oh, that was a terrible joke.
You have fought for Optimus.
So there's evidence that at some point during the creation of these films that there was actually some thought put into how these themes were going to function and develop. But at some point, for some reason, everything kind of went off the rails. Because when we get to film number 3, we start seeing cracks in the foundation. Like, we get to hear that Autobots theme when Optimus literally flies in and saves the day.
Dino, report to Bay 23.
And we hear the Bumblebee theme when he shows up. And then again later when he gets saved. And again, we hear quote-unquote Optimus, but it doesn't really show up for Optimus. It's more of like just there.
Both of us.
Then what we should do is we should sell it and buy a house.
But But we do hear Arrival to Earth in this film when the Autobots reveal themselves. But the strangest part of this film is that we hear Arrival to Earth when the Autobots are boarding the shuttle and actually leaving Earth.
I was so wrong.
That doesn't make it your fault, it just makes you human for a change.
But we also hear it again when they reappear. It would have been cool to maybe see the theme get played backward, which is technically called retrograde or something like that when the Autobots are boarding the shuttle to leave, because the Autobots leaving is literally the exact opposite of the name of the track. But maybe that's the point, it's supposed to remind the audience of the first time the Transformers arrived, which still made it feel a little weird or even awkward for me when they played Arrival again when the Autobots come back, which I'm sure nobody in the audience saw coming. So yeah, we still get to hear a lot of the music that got used from the last two films.
We're gonna do whatever we can to
Make it like it was.
But this is where you start to see large sections of film that don't really feel like they have any musical connection to the universe that had been established. And once the fourth film comes around, the whole musical structure almost completely gets left behind. I heard a little bit of one of Bumblebee's themes from the first film when Marky Mark finds Optimus. But I want to say the next time I heard familiar music was right here.
They're in trouble.
This isn't our fight. I'm done being an underdog.
Which is about 2 hours and 10 minutes into the film. Now, either my eyes glazed over at some point and I just tuned out, or they really didn't include almost any music from the last three films. It's really strange. It's almost like they got rid of Shia LaBeouf and then they figured, there goes the main character, time to completely rewrite the score, even though all the Transformers that got thematic material still appear in this film. It's not like the film is called Sam and the Adventures of His Magical Car, it's Transformers. But from what I was able to pick up, the music that was established in previous films doesn't really show up. And by film number 5, when the music from the first films actually shows up, it almost feels like a cameo.
I have not heard it since Cybertron fell. We are going to steal Quintessa's staff.
Lights up.
But then again, at the very end of the film, literally the last 2 minutes of this 2.5 hour film, we hear 3 full themes back to back, and then we get credits. And it's so weird to see so little musical information come back for these films that have such immense runtimes. You'd almost think you'd want to start repeating music just to give yourself less work. Having said that, the later films feel like they might have their own newer themes that show up, but I was just trying to pay attention to the Transformers series as a complete work, so if they're there, I didn't really notice them. It just doesn't make sense to introduce new music and ignore what had already been established, because it would only serve to separate these films from the franchise that spent the last decade developing. It's not like these are two films to a sequel trilogy, right? Did I miss a memo somewhere? Am I missing the point? I'll let the comment section set me straight. Looking at the Transformers series as a whole, it's kind of sad and strange to see how it unfolded. The fourth film has a whole plot about making synthetic Transformers. It would have been cool to hear an alternate version of Bumblebee's theme to represent Stinger. Or the whole point of the fifth film is that King Arthur and medieval England was significant to the Transformers timeline, which, I don't really get. But then again, why not throw some Gregorian chant into the mix? I know that the big joke nowadays is that the Transformers series sucks and it's filled with advertising so they can break even, or they're just trying to appeal to a foreign market. So what's the point in even discussing the soundtrack now, right? But when you look at the Transformers series as a whole from a musical perspective, you can see a very clear decline. There's a lot of musical material in the first film that would have created a really interesting foundation to build on for the rest of the series. But by the third film, you could start to see cracks, and by film number 5, there are almost no connections to be made with the first, at least from what I was able to find. It kind of makes you wonder if all the negative attention surrounding the Transformers franchise somehow got to the team behind the soundtrack. I honestly feel like the musical foundation and framework of the Transformers series would have been strong enough to develop into a really interesting series of film scores had it not been for the limitations of the films themselves. I feel like it could have worked. I really do. Thanks for watching. I'd like to thank my patrons for making these videos possible, with a very special thank you to Anna Birch, AFN Matt, Ethan Rooney, Hayden Elza, and Donovan Hodges. If you like what you saw here, be sure to subscribe and check out my other videos. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch to have your musical questions answered live, and if you really like what I'm doing, consider supporting the channel on Patreon. But that's going to be it from me for now. Thanks for watching.